Welcome to Author Interviews, my first and probably only episode. Talking to MK England today, author of this awesome book, The Disasters.
That's the one.
And it's coming out in paperback, December
17th.
December 17th.
December, not too far from now.
Yes, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes. And they have this book coming out January 21st, right?
Also not too far from now.
Not too far from now. So we're going to talk about Spellhacker mostly, and then a little bit of writing tips and, whatever we can get out of MK over here.
Sounds good.
So I think for fun and for the people who are only going to watch 2 minutes of this, let's give 3 words that describe Spellhacker, but because you sent 4 chapters, read them all immediately.
Oh, yay.
And loved it. So I have 3 words, and if you think of 3, let me know when you're ready.
Okay.
And then we'll say them at the same time. We'll just do one at a time.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I think so.
Okay. So I'm going to go 3, 2, 1.
All right.
3, 2, 1, magic.
Heists.
Oh, that was my second one.
Okay, magic was my second one.
Oh,
so
well, good. So we'll just
we got
do one
there.
more. Okay.
Great.
3, 2, 1,
Queer.
friendship. Oh, yeah, queer friendship.
All of the things.
Yeah, and that actually leads me to one of my main things that I wanted to talk about, which is in both of your books. I'm going to hold them up again because they're so pretty together.
They match.
They, from just the first 4 chapters, I know this to be true, they both have really great representation and diversity. And what I really loved about that in The Disasters was that it's not written in like this character is this, and so you must know that going forward. It's like, this is who these people are.
Because that's how we are as humans.
How we are as humans, right? And for me in this one, in The Disasters, for those of you who have not read it, the main character is bi, and bi representation is like non-existent. So for me that was really important to see that it's just, we are people, and this is part of who we are.
Yeah.
And I loved that. And so I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about the representation in Spellhacker.
Sure. Yeah, so in Spellhacker, in everything I write, really, it's just chock full of queer characters all over the place. So the main character is queer and mostly sapphic. The love interest in this book is non-binary, and then there are tons of awesome queer background characters. I think my personal favorites are, there is a bakery owner who is a widowed queer woman. She's fantastic. And there are some elderly science husbands who I just love. They're honestly some of the stars of the book. You don't get to them until later in the book.
Yeah, I was going to say the first
wonderful.
4 chapters did not give me enough, apparently.
Yeah. And this is a fantasy world, so in terms of like racial diversity and things like that, it's more described rather than named, because this is a second world, but there is also racial diversity and diversity of culture and things like that.
Very cool. And then talking about that world from, again, just the first 4 chapters, the magic system is completely original. I've never read anything like that before. So I don't know if you want to just talk a little bit about it. I know we don't want to give away too much, but there were tech witches and spell weavers, and magic is called Maz. Is that how you say it? Okay.
I have not decided if it's Maz or Maz. I figured I would just find out what came out on the audiobook and go, yeah, that's what I meant the whole time. So the magic system is really where this book originated.
Okay.
So it kind of came out of the concept of magic hackers, and that just came up during a tabletop role-playing game, because that's how I am. I was going to say that's how I roll, and then I was like, no, too funny, but now I said it anyway, so there you go, you got it. So I took this concept of magic hackers, and I was like, all right, I could take this in a couple different directions, but what I really want to do is write a world where magic and technology can interact. So in this world, there are spell weavers who have a natural sort of physical aptitude for working with Maz, and then there are tech witches who can sort of wear hardware, technology that allows them to interact with the magic. So that's kind of baked into the world.
Yeah, so then I was wondering if I could just show this page. So
Sure.
they included the periodic table of, I'm going to say Maz.
Let's say
I'm
Maz.
claiming it.
I'm going to go with
it's
it.
Maz.
All right. Official pronunciation
yes.
declared.
So there are, how many different strains?
14.
14 for now. And there's a key here. I don't know if you guys can see it, but so it's not your typical like, oh, the wind is the element, and there's an actual physical resource, right? In the planet or Earth or
yeah,
where it is,
I called it a periodic table because I really did sort of design it to be like the elements, like naturally occurring elements in the world. And so there is something that is sort of earthy magic, but it has, you know, different kinds of properties. You weave it together with other strains of Maz to create different effects. So yeah, I really loved the visual of weaving like glowing threads of magic.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so then when we talk about both of these books, the Disasters had a 4-person crew.
Disasters had a 5-person crew.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Spellhacker has 4.
Yeah.
Is that the crew concept? Is that something that you think is going to be kind of a theme in all your books, or was it just
Probably.
kind of accidental?
No, I'm not sure I know how to not write ensemble casts.
Okay.
I have tried to develop book ideas where it's just centered around like 1 or 2 people, and it's not that I get bored. Maybe it is that I get a little bored. I don't know. I think I just don't know how to do it yet. So maybe when I grow up and I'm a big writer one day, I'll know how to write fewer than 4 or 5 characters. But I really just love, I think it comes out of, you know, my birth as a writer comes from sci-fi and fantasy and role-playing games and stuff like that, where you have
a crew.
There's a party. You got to have the party.
Party
and
on
I
the
like
mission.
to think about the different roles that everybody has. You know, got to fill out the party.
Is that how you create your characters in like a tabletop sort of?
I'll usually create character sheets for them, or especially if I'm just trying to get a feel for them, or I'm a little stuck on building the crew, I might pull out some of my role-playing books and use them to brainstorm.
I wanted to also, we are in a coffee shop, so there might be some background noise.
But it's delicious.
It is really good. So I wanted to see if it's on here. Goodreads calls it a genre-bending YA fantasy heist story. Genre-bending is like kind of a newer thing, I think. I haven't really heard that term being used a lot. Is that also something you're doing intentionally, or is it just...
I did sort of do it intentionally because I thought it was kind of baked into that basic concept of magic hackers. You have magic, you have hacking technology. I thought about taking it into a magical hacking kind of, you know, so that it was pure fantasy, but I decided I wanted to smash them together. And, you know, there have been genre-bending books forever, but they don't... I think they're not as common as I would like them to be, and I think part of the reason is that they're really hard to market. So, I mean, right there, that is like a giant mouthful of like YA heist fantasy, genre bending, like, and it came out when we were trying to design the cover for the book too. We were like, how do we show magic and technology and it's funny and what do we do? You know? I think we landed somewhere great eventually, but it was hard to get there.
Yeah, and I think it's funny for me too because I when I go to the bookstore, I'm like, why is sci-fi and fantasy always one section? Like, I want sci-fi and I want fantasy, but this book,
where would you put it?
Sci-fi fantasy, right? Like, it's not one or the other. So that I think now is a good time then to talk about the pre-order campaign. So it comes out again January 21st, but you can order it now. You can even order signed copies, right?
You can. You can order signed copies from the Fountain Bookstore in Richmond, Virginia. They are awesome. They are a great person to support for Small Business Saturday.
Yeah,
since
and
we're recording this on Black Friday.
Oh, we are. Yes. Your launch party's there too, right?
Yes.
Your first. There's 2.
There's 2 launch parties. There's actually going to be an event here too.
Oh, wow.
The first launch party is going to be actually 2 days before the book comes out on January 19th.
Okay.
So that's a Sunday.
So if you order the book before the launch, or you get it at that at the launch party, so what do we get? What's our swag?
So if you order from the Fountain Bookstore, then your book is going to be hand signed, and you will get all of the swag. Everybody who pre-orders or requests the book from their local public library will get the swag. So you don't have to order from Fountain to get it. But you should order from Fountain because they're great.
And you get it signed.
Yes, and you get it signed. So everybody is going to get a postcard, Spellhacker postcard, with the final cover on it. The final cover is a little different. We got rid of some of the like unicorn sparkle clouds.
Unfortunately.
Or fortunately. I don't know. I was like, it seems a little too like Happy Sparkle Fun Times for the tone of the book, but I don't know. You be the judge. You get a Spellhacker bookmark, which is two-sided. You will get a signed bookplate in silver Sharpie, which is nice and shiny. You will get 2 stickers. You will get Unicorn Sparkles McSunshine with the smug unicorn.
That's kind of a character?
It's a little bit of a character.
Yeah, I think I met them briefly.
Yes. And then you get the Badass Illegal Fun Times sticker.
Fun.
Yes, which also has a little bit of the smug unicorn kind of ghosted in the background.
Love it.
You will also get a printable card in case you want to give a pre-order of Spellhacker as a gift. Then the front is kind of a Spellhacker themed joke. And then on the inside has a little description of the book and kind of the punchline of the joke, saying, "Hey, I got you Spellhacker, congratulations."
So you can still gift something even though the book won't arrive until January.
Yes, and I am going to be sending out all of this swag as soon as the stickers finally arrive. I'm going to try and get everything out before the Postal Service's deadline for holiday mailings. So if you do want to give it for a birthday or for Christmas or for any other holiday, just, let me know. Try and order as early as possible, and I will get that stuff out in the mail. There's one final pre-order goodie, and that is a new disaster short story, which will be emailed out to everybody who pre-orders on December 17th when the Disasters paperback comes out. And the Disasters paperback, I forgot to mention, also does have a preview of Spellhacker in the back. Yeah, so that's fun too. So that's the main part of the pre-order campaign, and then everybody who submits, whether it's a library request or a purchase, you will be entered to win one of 3 grand prize packages.
It's my favorite part.
Yay! So everybody, the three grand prize winners will get a 30-minute Skype conversation with me to talk about library stuff, book stuff, writing, publishing, anything you want that's kind of in that realm. You'll get a little piece of handmade art by me, because why not? You'll get a handwritten letter from me, and also a little packet of secrets and annotations about Spellhacker. Yeah, so 3 of those packages.
Very cool. And so how do we enter for that?
So if you go to my website, mkengland.com, there is a link right on the homepage in 2 different spots that says like pre-order thank you gifts. So just click on one of those. There's full details, all the legal terms and conditions, void where prohibited, no restriction, blah blah blah, all of that stuff.
But it is international, right?
But it is international, and it's really, really simple. All you have to do is send an email to mkenglandbooks@gmail.com with your proof of purchase or your proof of library purchase request. And give me a valid address. Double check it, please, so I don't get returned mail again this year.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was a struggle.
Okay, so then the only other thing I was wondering about Spellhacker, and I think I know the answer. So we've established that you're super sci-fi geeky, which I love.
Absolutely.
I am too. And fantasy. So are there sci-fi fantasy Easter eggs in Spellhacker?
Ooh, yes.
You don't have to tell us what they are, but should we be...
You should be on the lookout.
Okay.
I would say there are probably not as many as there were in the Disasters, because the Disasters was so much in that vein of Star Wars, Guardians of the Galaxy, Babylon 5, Firefly. It really is the spiritual successor to those things. Whereas Spellhacker, I think the biggest influence would be the Final Fantasy series of games, especially Final Fantasy VII. So if you're into Final Fantasy VII, you will see some stuff.
Good to know.
There might be a few other little things here and there. Usually when I'm trying to come up with a name for something and I can't think of anything, I come up with some kind of nerdy reference. And
there was one in the first 4 chapters, I can tell you that, and it was a Star Wars reference. So I don't even know if you did it on...
I can't remember what it was. I'm sure it was intentional, but I don't remember
Revenge
what it was.
of the Plague?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, I think so. Is there anything else you want to talk about with the books?
I think we kind of got it
Got it all? All right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're both kind of the same sort of tone in terms of fast-paced thriller sort of pacing, funny, sarcastic.
Yeah, The Disasters was one of the most fun books I read this year. It was so fun to read.
That was my goal, was fast and fun.
It was. And it had some cool tech stuff too.
Yeah.
All right, then let's move on to some writing, publishing sort of stuff.
Sure.
So this is your second. Mm-hmm. Spellhacker's your second. Was it more difficult, easier, more fun? Any difference at all in the second book?
I think there were a lot fewer revisions, just because I kind of knew what I was doing a little bit more. Mm-hmm. The Disasters just went through round after round after round of revisions because I hadn't learned yet how to structure a book, and I kept getting the like from 50 to 75% the third quarter horribly wrong. Oh. I completely gutted and rewrote that portion of the book like a million times.
Oh my gosh.
And I didn't have to do any major surgery like that with Spellhacker. So not that I think that every future book I write is going to be easier, because I'm sure it was a quirk of this one, and others will have their challenges.
Yeah, so was The Disasters the first novel that you ever wrote?
It was the second. Okay. The first one I wrote will never see the light of day. It was awful, but it was good enough that when I sent query letters, I didn't get laughed out of, the internet, I guess.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
I got enough basic interest to go like, okay, I kind of know how to do this. I have proven to myself that I can finish a book, which was really the most important thing I needed to know. And as soon as I had the idea for this one, I was like, no, this is the one. Forget that first book. The first book was like that tropey fantasy novel we all have inside that we have to like exercise before we can write the real thing. So yeah, I'm glad it's gone.
So one of the questions that I got from several people on Instagram to ask you is, how do you know when you're ready to query a book?
That's a good question. And I don't think there is really like a concrete, finite answer to that. I think the best answer I can give is when it's as good as you can make it. Mm-hmm. Hopefully you have critique partners and you've worked with some other people. You've learned to take criticism, which is a process, and it's not an easy one. But you've gone through a round or two of critique with your critique partners. You've gotten some different readers who are hopefully not like your mom who loves you so much and just wants you to succeed and thinks you're brilliant. You've really like done the hard work of, looking at what you've written and saying like, is this actually good, or is this a pile of words on a page that I am proud that I have completed, which is also a great accomplishment. So good for you. But just take it as far as you personally can. And if you can write a query letter that has a clear character, conflict, and stakes in it, then I'd say you probably have at least a solid concept, and give it a shot, Good luck.
Yeah, that's great advice, I think. One of the other questions I got was just, where do you start? So I think the person I got this question from, I think, has been writing sort of in secret. I think they're not, publicizing like, hey, I did Nano.
Yeah.
So maybe just, where do you start? How do you know that the idea you're working on is the one to follow? That kind of thing.
That is a good question. I feel like this answer is going to be different for everyone, so I'm going to answer for myself. For me, when I first have like the tiny seed of an idea, those seeds are nothing. It's something like, magic hackers or, really good pilot fails out of Space Academy. It's like, these are ideas, but they are not stories. And so it really is, I have to go through this whole process of like letting the idea sit in a Google Doc for months until it bumps up against something else that makes sense. Or I see, Guardians of the Galaxy in the theater and go, oh, I have the tone now. Now I know what I want this book to feel like. And so something like that will kind of kick it off. For me, I am a big planner, so I have to be able to write out most of a synopsis for a book before I can start. But for me, the most critical thing is I have to be able to hear the character voices really clearly in my head. If I have to stop and think at every junction, like, now how would this character say this? What would they sound like? What would their reaction be? Then I feel like I'm not ready to write yet. Other people, your mileage may vary drastically. So this was just, the process that I've found over the years that works for me. I really need those elements to be in place first. I have no idea how discovery writing works. It sounds terrifying and anxiety-inducing to me.
That's how I write, and I don't know
how do y'all do it?
works.
That sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't do that. So for me, I would say you probably at least need to know your main character, know your core conflict, and know what's at stake, and have some idea of the character voice before you dive in. And for me, I think one of the critical discoveries for me in terms of my process was discovering that even though I am a severely introverted person, I am an external thinker. So I really need somebody who can just sit there and listen to me babble about a book idea and talk it out and not ask too many irrelevant questions, and, but ask the right questions here and there.
So for you, is that a CP or just a writing buddy?
It can be, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
Sometimes it's my poor, long-suffering partner. Sometimes it's, often it is one of my critique partners. Shout out to Lee and Jamie. Thanks/sorry. But it's a critical part of my process that I can't avoid. I will sit there and stare at a blank page for weeks, and then I will go sit down and talk to Lee at a coffee shop for 20 minutes and suddenly have the book figured out. So
that is interesting.
Is what it is.
And I think that's hard sometimes too, because you sit with the idea and it's like your little baby, and you're like, what if I tell somebody and they hate it? Like, what if they don't like my baby?
Maybe.
But I mean,
I think any idea though has potential in it somewhere, and it's just all about the execution. My critique partner Lee, is more of a contemporary person, but that doesn't mean that she can't help me a lot in terms of especially character and the emotional heart of a story and stuff like that. Just helping to make sure that it has the ooh shiny factor, like, okay, there's something cool here, and making sure that there is something, in terms of character or emotion that is going to be gripping.
Okay, cool.
You can learn something from anybody in this entire world about anything.
If you take nothing else from this, take that. That was good.
Learned it from Bill Nye.
Love that guy. And then I wanted to ask you too, I know you had mentioned somewhere on Instagram that your dad was sort of in the aerospace realm of work. Do you think that's where your love of sci-fi started, or where did that seed get planted in you, do you think?
It's hard to know where, it's a chicken and egg thing. My household from birth, my parents' first date was to see Star Wars. My brothers, I have 2 older brothers, and they really liked to watch Star Wars. So I was it's not like I am definitely by far the most intense nerd in this family, so it's not like they raised me to be a nerd. They actually raised me to be a normal human being, and I rebelled at every step of the way. And I'm very happy with how I turned out, thank you. But I think that had to have played a role. I was exposed to it, and then I took to it immediately. And I was very lucky to have a dad who, introduced me to Isaac Asimov and gave me the nonfiction books about the planets and stuff like that, and entertained me when I was like, yeah, but how could you make a rocket ship that goes to Mars? It's like, well, you could have an engine that splits water atoms or something, and he was not a rocket engineer or anything like that. He handled NASA or United Space Alliance's toxic waste and stuff like that, helping them follow environmental regulations for
Also
disposing of all of that stuff. So yes, also very important. But yeah, I think more than anything else, it was just having a parent who was willing to foster that in me.
Yeah. And so did you start writing at a younger age, do you think? Or when did you start?
I loved to write stories in elementary school and middle school, but especially late middle school and into early high school is when my anxiety really started to take hold, and suddenly I just couldn't stand to show anybody anything, and I couldn't even stand to read my own writing because I was hating it so intensely the entire time. So I really loved when I had the excuse of a creative writing assignment in English class. Whenever we had something we had to write that was not an essay about a book, but instead we had to write a short story on a theme or something like that, I was like, this is my chance. And I always got really great grades on those assignments, but then I never did anything outside of that. So I really remember this period of time in college, where I was working at Books A Million, and we just had this little like scrap paper thing next to the register, and I was constantly like pulling little pieces of scrap paper and writing like an idea or a bit of dialogue or something like that. Never did anything with it. I was like barely 20 years old at this point, and I didn't actually write a book start to finish until I was 28 or 29 or something like that.
Do you still have those scraps of paper?
They might be in my house somewhere. I don't know. I probably have thrown them away. I've made efforts to like declutter and downsize that have not been entirely successful, but that seems like something I probably would have thrown away.
No.
I know. I'm sorry. Yeah. My first terrible book, I started it and stopped it like 3 or 4 times different years for NaNoWriMo. So I started writing it, and I would get 5,000 words in and go, this is terrible, I hate it, and be done. And then the next year I'd get 10,000 words in and be like, I hate this, I'm terrible, goodbye. So I finally got sick of that cycle and finished that first book, and then everything else started to happen.
And then threw it away, and then started the next book, right?
That's kind of true, actually, yeah.
Okay, let's finish with your best piece of writing advice.
If you have not finished something yet, finish something. I don't care if it's good or bad or, anything like that. I really, for me, the NaNoWriMo National Novel Writing Month style of writing works and I think for anybody who has anxiety or any other kind of issue like that prevents you from writing or makes the writing process really, really difficult, I think NaNoWriMo can really be helpful in turning that off or at least muting it some. You have permission to just like drive forward and let it suck. And I really needed that. That is how I finished my first book. Was not during NaNoWriMo, but I did it NaNoWriMo style in February. I was like, all right, in the month of February, I will finish this. And I did finish it, and it was terrible, but it taught me that I could finish a book, and that a book is a finite thing that can be completed. It is just a pile of words of a certain length, and you can get there. Both The Disasters and Spellhacker were NaNoWriMo novels, though, because it just works for me. Yeah. So, finish something.
Finish. You can do it.
Other than that, if you've already finished something, then just find your people. Find your critique partners. Find the people who are going to believe in you and the people who are going to challenge you. Really find the people who can challenge you. Because getting over that process of critique sucks and it hurts, and you got to figure out how to process all of that and take what's good and leave what doesn't work for you, and all of that critical part of this whole process.
Cool. All right, wrap up. This paperback coming out December 17th. I'm terrible with dates, obviously.
Got it. Yep.
And this will come out in hardback January 21st, but you can order it now.
Yay.
From wherever books are sold, I assume.
Yes.
But preferably from the Fountain Bookstore in Richmond to get it signed and get all your pre-order goodies. So, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm definitely going to be probably buying both of them.
Thank you.